Internet, 2021 is drawing to a close, and it's that time of the year where I, your faithful Tommy Teal hat, put together a favorites list and a hated list. I don't do best of or worst of because I always feel like best and worst are subjective, and I always feel like people like a lot of stuff that I hate, and I hate a bunch of stuff that everybody likes. Particularly in music, I know Måneskin is taking kind of a beating this year, and that's too bad because I actually like Måneskin, but you know what, that's a whole different topic for a whole different day. Today we're going to focus on the favorites, and I gotta say, putting together a favorites list is among the hardest things I've done for this channel this year. There were so many things that came out this year that I just loved, and that I just felt like I was being way too generous with my 4 hats out of 4 rating, to the point where it's like, do I even review anything, or do I just get on here and praise it for 5 to 7 minutes? It got to a point where I almost considered expanding it to 8, or if I wanted to be really cliche, maybe even 10. But after some deep thought and writing a few things off because of technicalities, I was able to pick 5. Today I'm going to talk about them, my favorites of 2021. I technically may have reviewed some of these items already in the channel at some point, but I'm bringing them back up and I will try to be as brief as possible. Also, keep in mind that I did not see everything that came out in 2021. Nobody has, etc. And of course, this is all subjective. These are my favorites. You probably hate something that's on this list, and in fact, I can guarantee that you're probably going to hate at least one of the items that I liked because, well, we'll get to that one. But in the meantime, before we get into the 5 proper, however, a first for the channel, we have some honorable mentions for 2021's favorites of 2021. And honorable mention number 1 is Soul. I ended up loving this movie. I dare say it was probably the best thing Pixar had come out with yet. Unfortunately, it came out in the very tail end of 2020, so unfortunately I can't count it. Honorable mention number 2, Class Action Park. I have no idea when this came out, and there's plenty of stuff that came out in 2021 that I absolutely adored. More than I can say for 2020, when the pickings were so small that I had to pick a movie from 2018 to bolster the ranks, but Class Action Park is an amazing documentary with a surreal subject that you just have to see it to believe it. The idea that a water park like this could actually exist in real life, just amazing. Honorable mention number 3, and probably a controversial honorable mention, Free Guy. I remember seeing this in the movie theater, and I remember really, really loving it. And I remember it getting nothing but positive reviews throughout the entire month it came out. Then October happened, and suddenly everybody hated the movie, which baffled the heck out of me, but okay, I guess, you know, it's not the first time I ever went to a movie and I loved it, and then upon a second viewing, or really just after thinking about it for 5 minutes, I ended up hating it. Insert Rise of Skywalker reference here, but in any case, I know it's maybe not the most accurate portrayal of what video games look like and how video games operate and all that, but compared to most movies that tackle this subject, I think it did better than most, and even then, I still thought it was fine. I thought it was an amusing enough movie, and I don't know if I will maintain that opinion if I watch it a second time, but here and now, I liked it enough to consider it in the honorable mentions, if nothing else. Alright then, that takes care of that. On to the big 5. First up on my favorites list this year. Admittedly, I didn't know anything about Last Night in Soho when I went into this movie. I mean, the only things I really knew was that the commercials for it played on AEW television every now and then, usually when matches were running long and they had to go into break and do that picture-to-picture, and let's be real, nobody's paying attention to the picture-in-picture. Everybody's just going to the bathroom when they need to because... I'm getting on a tangent here, but you know what I mean. The commercials for this movie would play every now and then, and the only thing the commercials told me is that it was going to be a horror movie, and I knew it was going to be a horror movie because it did all the tropes of horror film commercials and horror film trailers where everything is all and everything's jump scary and everything has like the creepy music and all that stuff, and I knew Edgar Wright was directing this movie, although that had more to do with Twitter than it had to do with those commercials. And Edgar Wright usually makes some pretty good movies, and that was pretty much the thing that convinced me I needed to see this, because has Edgar Wright made a bad movie? If he has, I haven't seen it yet. Basically what I'm trying to say is this movie was one gigantic leap of faith, and I had no guarantee it was going to be good or bad or anything like that. I generally avoided spoilers and I avoided reviews, and I'm kind of glad I did that because this movie ended up being really good. I genuinely enjoyed this movie from start to finish, and while it did get a little predictable in spots, i.e. if the lights turned red, you already knew something bad was going to happen, I still enjoyed a lot of what I saw, and I would highly recommend everybody check out this movie. It is a blast. Next up, admit it, you knew Squid Game was going to be on the list. You knew it, I knew it, the American people knew it. Squid Game is, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest thing to come out of Netflix since, I don't know, House of Cards, BoJack Horseman. This is one of those shows that everybody has heard of and everybody loves. Nobody has anything negative to say about this show outside of maybe the English dub, but hey, subs versus dubs. It's a debate that rages on even in 2021. Brings me back to my old internet forum days, but I digress. I finally got around to watching it in October sometime, maybe late September. It's somewhere in that general area. And after weeks and weeks of hype, I can say with 100% certainty, the hype is legit. This show is amazing. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a particular connoisseur of Korean television shows and movies, and I was worried for a second that this was going to be sub-only, which I'm not against subtitles, but as somebody with a vision problem, I lament whenever something is sub-only because it means I'm going to have to pause every 10 seconds and read the subtitles. And sometimes you get that one scenario where the color on screen is the exact same color as the subtitles, and it makes it even harder to read. It becomes a real pain in the ass, and frankly, if I wanted to strain my eyes for several hours at a time trying to read text, I'd read a book. Or I'd play a JRPG. Either way. Fortunately, there was an English dub, and the English dub, at least in my opinion, was solid. There's probably some people who can point out things wrong, but I'm not one of them. The plot was captivating from start to finish. You really wanted to see who would win the Squid Game, even when you already knew it was going to be the main character. There were many twists and turns that you just gotta see this show for yourself, man. The hype is real. Check out Squid Game right now. Well, not right now. We still got 3 other things to talk about here, including... Much like Last Night in Soho, I went into The Green Knight knowing mostly nothing about the movie. Like, unlike with Last Night in Soho, I didn't even see commercials for it. However, also unlike Last Night in Soho, The Green Knight is based on Arthurian legend, and while I'm not familiar with all the myths and all the legends, I'm familiar enough with the story of the Green Knight to where I had an idea of what the movie was kinda going to be about, and it was really up to A24 from there to put a unique spin on things to keep my attention. And luckily, they did just that. Of course, I say that knowing full well it's A24. They're right up there with, like, Blumhouse in terms of studios who generally make really good movies, and in A24's case, I think the closest thing to a bad movie they've put out was probably Lamb. And it's not even because Lamb was a bad movie in my case. It has more to do with the fact that it's in a different language, and as I said in the Squid Game commentary earlier, I'm going to have to hit pause, and I'm going to have to strain my eyes to read it, and it's such a pain in the ass. Fortunately for me, this movie actually was in English. Old Arthurian English, but English all the same. And I appreciate that. This was probably the best movie I saw all summer, and while I admit I didn't see a whole lot in the theaters this summer, it was nice to actually go into a theater for the first time all summer and actually watch something that was, good. It may not have been the first movie I saw in theaters that summer, but it's definitely a tie between this and Last Night in Soho for the best. And I highly recommend that you check this one out if you're into Arthurian mythology, or really if you're just into A24 movies. Next up. Oh boy, I can taste the hate mail from here. This one is going to be a controversial pick, but hear me out. Hear me out before you get mad. I know you've probably already scrolled down to the comment box and you're already going to declare blood feud on me and call me part of the Hollywood elite. You know, all that typical stuff, but hear me out, I beg you, okay? A lot of people who saw Masters of the Universe Revelations were hardcore He-Man fans who were pissed off for a whole myriad of reasons. You know, there's the crowd of people who watched the first 10 minutes of episode 1 and then got super pissed because He-Man isn't the main character anymore. We passed the mantle down to Teal. And then there are the people who made up their minds the moment they finished watching that Clownfish TV video. And I'm not going to fling mud at Clownfish TV or any other YouTuber like that. That's not me, but I genuinely don't find channels like that interesting or appealing, so naturally I'm not going to take their word for it at face value. I'm going to go out and formulate my own opinion. And then there's probably the one group of people who actually watched the show from start to finish and genuinely didn't like what they saw, and that's fine. Regardless of which group you belong to, this show inspires a lot of anger and a lot of hatred. And one of my friends in real life has actually declared blood feud on Kevin Smith and said he will never give that man a single dime of his money. Ever from this point onward, he has declared blood feud. And he did it over a cartoon. And I'm probably the last person on earth who should make that kind of commentary, and we'll get into that when we get into my most hated list, but this is the thing with me. Unlike a lot of those people who were diehard He-Man fans who went into Masters of the Universe Revelations and absolutely hated it, I fucking hate He-Man. Like, I say I don't like Bill and Ted and Ghostbusters or some other franchises in the past, and I say that, but it's not because I hate them. It's, if anything, I feel genuine apathy and ambivalence. Like, basically, I don't care. Somebody wants to watch it when it's on TV, or somebody invites us all over and there's nothing else to watch. Hey, I got Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, you want to watch that? And I'm like, okay, I guess there's nothing else, that's fine. He-Man, on the other hand, I hate He-Man. I think it's corny, I think it's dumb. It is basically a 30-minute toy commercial. I cannot believe that something like this inspired this kind of devoted, psychotic fan base. In fact, I'm kind of hesitant to say this stuff out loud because I know just mentioning out loud that I liked Masters of the Universe Revelations is going to bring all sorts of shit on my lawn, but it is what it is. Frankly, I will say this much. I wouldn't have given Masters of the Universe Revelations so much as a second thought if Kevin Smith wasn't even involved. Like, if they had gotten literally anyone else, I probably wouldn't have given this show the time of the day one way or the other, based entirely on the fact it's He-Man related. But, you know, Kevin Smith, weird choice. I'm genuinely interested in seeing where this goes. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Kevin Smith has made nothing but good movies and good TV shows. I've sat through Jersey Girl, I hated it. I took a look at the previews for Cop Out, and you could not pay me to go see that movie. Admittedly, I like Tusk, but Tusk is one of those polarizing movies. Again, you either love it or you hate it. I will say that Masters of the Universe Revelations did do a couple of things that I probably wouldn't have done, you know. I probably wouldn't have ended episode 5 on a cliffhanger and then wait like several months to put part 2 of the first and what is probably going to be the only season up on Netflix. Furthermore, I probably would not have ended season 1 on a tease, but I'm not saying you shouldn't hate Masters of the Universe Revelations. I'm not saying that I'm 100% in the right and you're 100% in the wrong. What I'm saying is, I came at this from a different angle than most, and I managed to enjoy this a lot more than a lot of other people did, and maybe a lot more than I probably should. That is my take on it. Next, please. This is the point in the list when I found myself struggling, because There were 3 things I wanted to put on this list, but I only had enough space for one, and it felt like a grave disservice making the other 2 honorable mentions. I wanted to include Jupiter's Legacy because I thought it was a really cool idea. Like, okay, maybe it's not the most original take on the superhero formula ever, but I still got a kick out of it. I still loved most of it, and I really recommend that you check that one out. I also wanted to include Brand New Cherry Flavor because that show was just weird. Also, it involved cats. I like cats. However, I made the executive decision to give this spot to Midnight Mass. And why? Well, for no other reason, I actually finished Midnight Mass. It's not that I didn't want to finish Jupiter Legacy or finish Brand New Cherry Flavor, it's just that I never got around to it, usually because I was working on something else, or possibly even because I just never got around to it, and I'm hoping to do that eventually. I'm kind of going through all my other stuff here, but for the most part, Midnight Mass gets this spot by sheer virtue of the fact that I saw it from start to finish, and I loved it. Is the Catholic Church an easy target? Hell yeah. They're awkward, they're weird, they're creepy. They have a bit of a bad history with, I'm not even sure I can say the word on YouTube anymore, but priests who like little boys a little too much, shall we say. So of course we're gonna make a horror film about them. Really though, if you think about it hard enough, you could just as easily apply all the commentary, or at least most of it, to the other branches of Christianity, like the Baptists and the snake handlers, and maybe a few other evangelical cliques that don't exactly have the best reputation even among other Christians. Just the devotion to blind faith. Somehow looking at the very obvious monster in the room and completely misinterpreting what it is. Just, it's something that could easily happen in circles like that. Oh, and by the way, if you're one of those guys that says the horror of the series died the moment they revealed the monster, congratulations, dumbass, you missed the point of the show entirely. I can't recommend Midnight Mass enough, and you don't even have to wait for Halloween if you don't want to. I say watch it, and watch it right now. This show is pretty much my favorite of the year. I know that I don't generally put these entries in a ranked order. I've probably said that a few times already over the years, but I don't do that. But if I did, trust me, I would probably be putting Midnight Mass at number 1. And that's going to do it for my favorites of 2021 list. I know that maybe some of you won't agree with everything on here, especially one particular entry, but those are my favorites. What are you going to do? Come back tomorrow, or whenever I get around to uploading it, and I'll share with you my hated of 2021. Until next time.